What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Same Difference. I am one of your co-hosts, Kory May, and this is my tag team partner, the good doctor, Dr. JD Mass. Doctor, how are you?
I'm well. Great to be back with you, Kory.
The pleasure
Looking
is
forward to
all
learning
mine.
some more about you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear some more about you, too. And where are you right now? Where are you this week?
I am in U City, St. Louis, Missouri.
I know you rep it, and I know you rep it well. We've talked about representation, and we've talked about who we are and how where we are is important to us. I want to get more into that in a minute or two, but I want to thank the fine folks at VPR Radio, the Queen Kiana, and DJ FMI.
Yes.
For giving us the opportunity and this fantastic platform to bring to you Same Difference.
Exactly. So, Kory, I want to know some more about you in high school. We talked briefly about that in the first episode. We talked about it from a sort of a where you were positioned and how things worked in your high school. But what were you like? What was Kory May like in high school in this setting?
Thank you for that question. In one of the previous episodes, we talked about representation and how important representation is, that you get to see people who are like you doing things to which you can aspire. And while the University of Iowa was close by, literally in my backyard, there weren't a whole lot of black role models in my high school. I think I had one black substitute teacher, or not substitute, but one black student teacher in my entire high school career. And
wow.
Yeah. This isn't to bash anyone in particular, because remember, high school is one of those traumatic times for everybody. Nobody comes through high school unscathed. You get some dirt on your shoes. You get your ego deflated. You get some strokes that are going to send you off, kind of like a birthing process when you graduate off into the future. A lot of times I felt invisible. I'm wearing a mask in high school, and it's a mask of always smiling. Matter of fact, when I was in junior high, here's a story for you. I'm in 8th grade science, and I'm smiling. That's all. I love this class, and I've got good grades. And I love this teacher. But he got weirded out by the fact that I was always smiling, and he thought I was up to no good. So one day he calls my mom, and we have a powwow we have a meeting in the principal's office. Now, my mom has taken time off from work. She's a single mom because my dad is deceased. So my mom decides to get all Perry Mason on him and asks, is my son doing well in your class? Yeah, he's got an A-B+ average in class. Is he disruptive? No, he's not. Does he have any homework that's outstanding? No, he does not. So what's the problem? Your son is always smiling, and I always feel like he's up to no good. And my mom, who doesn't usually get angry, channeled the voice of God and said, if he's doing nothing wrong, then why am I here? And if he does something wrong, you have my phone number, call me. But you made me take time off from work because my son is smiling. And she let the situation hang in the air. And at that moment, he realized what this looked like. Wasn't disruptive, didn't have bad grades in the class, turned in my assignments, but I loved science. And at some point, that started to kill my enthusiasm for science. But that's my choice as opposed to fully on that particular teacher. I felt it was easier to smile and laugh than let people know how much the microaggressions, we didn't call them microaggressions back in the 80s.
Right.
We just called it
bullshit,
racism, rudeness. And that was one of the things when you are at a young age, you aren't gifted with all the wisdom and life experience to filter out what is racism. Some people may very well be just a jackass.
right?
And their behavior may not be racist. Their behavior may just be them being that jackass. And there may be no racial component to it. But you run through people's behaviors through a series of filters to figure out, was that just clumsiness or was there a racial animus behind it?
Right.
And it's not something that you want to learn, but it's something that you end up going through because why am I being treated differently than my peers? So I smiled a lot. And a lot of people remembered me at the reunions because I was smiling. They didn't necessarily, Kory, you've got a beautiful smile. I think it's all right, but whatever.
Well, you smile a lot on your pictures, so you must think it's pretty all right.
I can do some things. But my best friend, the other black guy in our high school class, and I talked almost every night. And he and I shared, he listened to me. Now, my good friend, Rich, is truly African American. His parents were born in Africa. I believe he was born in Africa and has had citizenship here in the States. So he's uniquely African American. And the education that he got in Africa was different than the education that we were getting here in the States. In some respects, he had an entirely different worldview than the worldview that I had. Right. And to this day, again, because he has a much more global worldview, having been taught in education systems around the world that I don't have.
And also that we don't purposely we don't teach about any other cultures, but go ahead.
When we reconnected after a number of years, that was one of those conversations that he and I had. And it was about how awful some aspects of high school were. When I got to hang out with him, man, we'd trip and we'd talk, and that was my ride or die, my bestie. Matter of fact, he's in town for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to see him just within the next day or so. I think he just got into town today, and we're going to spend some time together. And always, my friendship with him was a sanctuary.
I'm sure.
So I'm up in front of people performing. I'm up in front of people speaking with these skills. And yet, socially, I was invisible. It's a difficult thing when you're 6'1" or 6'2" in high school and you're invisible. I think that is an important aspect of my personality, that you will acknowledge me. And I do not tolerate not being acknowledged. I do not tolerate it. I do not tolerate it. I do not tolerate it. And there have been moments in my adult life when I've lost my cookies over the fact that I'm standing here. I'm on this Zoom call. I am live in front of you, and you are ignoring me.
Yeah,
This will
I
not
think
stand.
that's an important aspect to racism. There's bigotry, which we label racist quite easily, but there's the subtleness of power dynamics
Right.
that that include just being able to ignore someone's value and existence in a situation, um, that is a subtle and very powerful form of racism, or characteristic of racism. Go
I
ahead.
think I think you're hitting on something. At some point, we should probably define the difference between bigotry, prejudice, and racism. Because too often, those have all become synonymous and interchangeable
Interchange.
when they are not.
Right.
And I know this may drift a little bit far afield, but I can guarantee that we can come back around to it. If there is a confusing paradigm in terms of our language, that if racism is a very general term focusing on someone's belief that their race is superior to the other, then anyone can be racist. And then at the same time, which means that it can be weaponized against people of color. Oh, they're racist. They're clearly racist.
Right.
Whereas when it comes to people of color using the term racist, then that term is as narrow as it can possibly be, meaning it's the most furthest, most violent, most virulent strains of what racist behavior is, such as burning crosses and racial violence like that. Well, I'm not racist because those are what racists are.
Mhm.
So at one point, it's a very broad definition, and then simultaneously, it's a very, very narrow definition as well. And I think as we continue to have these conversations, we need to elaborate on the definitions of those words, both, all three rather: bigotry and bigot, prejudice, and also racism. Now, that's just signposting for an upcoming podcast. So that's a teaser, everybody.
Right.
Tune in soon because we're going to talk about that.
So were there other things that you were aware of, either felt off and maybe didn't fully have the ability to contextualize, and or you knew right away that where you experienced kind of this, I'm a minority in a world of racism that can harm me?
Well, it was, again, socially, how people treated you when you came to their house.
Mm-hmm. Do tell.
There were some folks. I have a classmate. I have a couple of classmates who always saw me, and their moms would always be like, "Oh, Kory, you are so skinny. Let me feed you." And I love them.
Right.
Because they would go out of their way. Oh, they grab me around the waist and try to, how grandmothers would do that pinch
Right.
to see. No, they're
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, you are far too thin," and then they would feed me.
Yeah.
And again, I
And
love
that's a
them for that.
Southern culture, country culture kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, I loved them for that. And they
Yeah.
were always graceful and kind and open. And then there were other times when it was not so hospitable,
Mm-hmm.
merely being tolerated. My presence was tolerated.
Right.
And you can feel the difference.
You can feel the difference. Right.
You can feel the difference because they're treating the white friends like this, embracing them, and I'm at arm's length. I That was a moment or two or 10 where I had to be mindful, like, oh, I get it. I get it. Note to self: this is not a safe environment for me. At the same time, there were folks again who opened their homes to me and they were kind. Kind again. Kory, you're looking thin. Eat up.
Right.
We want you here. Please come by.
Right.
And that welcome makes a big difference.
My son, Stephen, very well spoken young man as far as articulation in comparison to me, especially. Um, uh, and he spoke about one of the first times, like he had he had some experiences in being in mostly white schools, um, and he had some good experiences with some of the parents of white children that he became friends with. Like you said, they took a liking to him, and it was purely humanity at its finest, which shows that melanin doesn't create that level of humanity. And then in high school, he went over to one kid's house, and he said he felt like an object. Right, he was watched. They were just kind of looking at him, like trying to figure him out. And not only were they watching him to see maybe if he was going to do anything, but just sort of this eerie feeling that just was different than a welcoming feeling. And that was his kind of first time, right? That he felt that he could really experience the feeling of that. And it happened around high school. So,
At that point, remember, everybody goes through puberty. And what I used to be a cute, non threatening kid,
mm-hmm.
now all of a sudden I'm 6 foot plus, large black man. Well, at that time
Right.
I wasn't large, but now this 6 foot tall black man, awkward, socially learning, because we are never fully graceful and poised in high school.
Hmm.
Try as we might, we can stick our feet in our mouths because our brains aren't fully developed.
Right.
And when we go through those moments, sometimes you think, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of my life because I said something stupid. And there are parents out there who are very forgiving. They're just like, relax. And then there's other folks that you are on guard. Yes, yes, sir. No, sir. To
Hmm.
this day, because my parents taught us this, everyone's first name was Mr. or Mrs. And now I'm in my mid 50s, and these family friends are like, "Oh, you may call me by my first name." I'm like, "Your first name is Mr. and her first name is Mrs. I am not ready to call you by your first name. I do not feel comfortable with that. I can call my friends who are my peers by their first name,
Right.
but yikes, I'm not ready to do that."
Oh, you couldn't meet my dad. He would not allow you to call him Mister. I mean, from when we were in the second grade, and he was, assistant, so to speak, coach of all the little league things, soccer, baseball that I would do. Call me Larry. Do not call me, like, to the point where one day I had to ask him, should I call you Dad or Larry? He was like, you can call me Larry. I'm Larry. I was like, what do you mean? But that, I call them both now. Um, I couldn't let him get away with just being Larry, but certainly I do call him that from time to time. But yeah, that's that's an interesting thing that you say that. Sorry, I don't mean to digress from your
No,
story.
but you get it. There was a
Right.
certain level of respect that was conferred upon us to dispense to the adults,
Hmm.
and we were never supposed to get so familiar that you could call somebody by their first name.
Right. Like I I know I could call them, either Miss Mac, Nellie's mom, or Ma, or was my best friend's grandmother. I could call her Ma. I could call her Grandma, Miss Boyd. I But yeah, I'm not gonna call her by her first name. None of them. I could call them by their Miss or Mister, or address their position. Mama, hey mama. Yep.
Yeah. And there are times when I slipped up and I said, I called someone mama that I thought, and the look of horror on their face was heartbreaking to me, because here I had considered this person to be a mother figure, and they looked absolutely horrified that I would call them or articulate that as a title for them.
Right.
So let's go back to high school. I was good enough to take out for the big events like homecoming and prom, but I wasn't dating in between those times. We talked about that briefly. And again, invisibility. Invisibility. There was the constant fear that somehow I'm going to tarnish somebody's reputation.
So how did you respond in sort of all of this? Like, what was your kind of behavior like given this?
I became the funny guy because humor allows us to deflect.
Hmm.
I can't be rejected if you accept me in some way, shape, or form by something that I do. If I make you laugh,
Right.
that's
I'm less threatening too.
far less threatening. And at some point or another, I figured it out. You laugh at dunces, you laugh with comedians.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point or another, there was always this desire to be, on some level, a comedian.
Okay. Then that has to open it up to who were the types of comedians that you aspired.
Well, in high school, it was pretty much Eddie Murphy
Okay.
because
Yeah.
Raw and Delirious came out and he was on fire. I still
On
have his cassette.
fire.
Oh, he was amazing. But before that, there was Bill Cosby. I loved Bill Cosby, and at the same time, you remember that some of my classmates called me Bill,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't call me Richard or
Right.
or Dick for Richard Pryor, because Richard Pryor would have eaten them alive
Mm-hmm.
in their ignorance. And I wasn't really allowed to listen to Richard Pryor. I could check out Bill Cosby albums from the library. I wasn't quite ready to get the Richard Pryor albums because
Right.
that would have triggered some things. Had I brought those records home and then played them while my mom was around, all that profanity, my mom would have lost her cookies.
Well, I don't even know if you were old enough to be able to check those out of the library
Well,
without your mom's permission.
a little eyebrow pencil right here, a little forced depth in my voice. You're gonna hear me doing some stuff like sensitivity, trying to deepen my voice for that moment. It wasn't until I got older that I was able to see Richard Pryor like live on the Sunset Strip on a Friday night at a friend's house on HBO or Cinemax. And I saw the tremendous power that this man had in his ability to take what his life experiences were and translate it into something funny that was sacred, profane, and shocking all at the same time. Sacred because it's his life experience and he couldn't be who he was without that experience. Profane, the manner by which he expressed it.
Right.
And then so utterly human because he was so vulnerable in these moments. Richard Pryor talks about all of his flaws.
Right.
All of his flaws. Now, as I got older, I was exposed to more. Robin Harris, Robin Williams, Paul Mooney, Tommy Davidson, Marsha Warfield, Red Fox, George Carlin. And George Carlin was as dangerous and seditious as anyone out there because of the power of his mind.
He was like another parent to me. He helped raise me for sure.
And when you start to think about the idea that people laugh at clowns,
right?
But people laugh with comedians. When you start to see what a comedian can do with life experiences, great writing, and deep thought, ooh. So comedy, coming up with the great one-liner, being one step ahead, having a combustible type of intelligence made me think about comedy. And maybe being up on stage might have been one of those secret dreams but being able to craft that wry turn of phrase to create that sharp one-liner, being able to quote an Eddie Murphy bit, it was everything. It was very much everything. And it was a shield for me. It was an absolutely positive experience, and it was my shield. So I laughed, and I made other people laugh, because if I had started to talk about how lonely and empty I was, I would have cried all the time.
Were you
And
consciously lonely and empty and putting that shield up at that time, or was it just instinctive and until you really were able to reflect on that?
So let's look at this from this perspective. Humor is often a trauma response.
Right.
And so when I was 11 years old, it's the beginning of my 6th grade year, I had a good friend die in a farm accident. When you were around here back in the late 70s, early 80s, you could, if you were a kid on your own farm, you could drive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a classmate dies, and he and I were pretty close. We'd been together as classmates since 2nd grade. He was a nice kid. His family was wonderful to me. They were kind people, humanitarians, just loving people. And they did not see color. And when I say that, I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, soft, cushy liberalism. I mean that they treated me like I was one of their children. They were kind people. Almost 45 years ago to the day, my dad died that same year. And then further into our 6th grade year, my 6th grade teacher committed suicide. And
Wow.
I was a mess. And just, I was numb.
Yeah.
Comedy made me feel things, and comedy gave me the idea that I was visible, but it was also a shield that I had. And it doesn't start really manifesting itself until I get older, junior high, like my freshman year and my sophomore year. That's when the comedy started to, or the funny aspect of me started to come out. By the time I graduate from high school, I'm a little bit bitter, but I hide it. And it puts me in a place where I want to leave Iowa City. And so I do. Now, let's talk about you, JD. Tell me about you and your high school experience. Where were you feeling accepted and excluded?
Wow. So high school was the best 4 years of my life.
I am envious of you.
Yes. I literally my childhood, I it's hard for me to cry about anything I go through as an adult, struggle wise, because of my childhood. Whereas some people have trouble and have been through a trauma in their childhood, like, losing the 3 people you spoke about may have done been a trauma for you. My childhood kind of wasn't. And what high school was for me was really a learning about my privilege in the world. And I say that inside of high school, kids talked stuff to me about coming from so much and not having to struggle, right? Like that was the big, you're spoiled brat, you're this, that, and the other. You got all of this. They saw how the results of my parents treating my friends a certain way, especially my best friend. You know, there was in any high school, there would be a level of bullying or attempt to bully in middle school and high school. And because of my early childhood meeting Shondo and Mike and us playing uh, Kill a Man, we called it, which was you catch the ball, everybody else tries to tackle you while you get from one end to the other. Somebody else catches it, everybody tries. So even just the two of us playing and them being bigger than me and we playing on the front yard, that developed this lack of fear because I was much smaller than everybody, right? I'm 5'3.5" now, and I claim my half so I can round it up to 5'4" when I have to only claim a whole inch. But
Never round down, always round up.
always round up. I need that half. Um, so, but Shondo's 6'3". Topher, who I've known since elementary school, was one of the first. Matter of fact, since I was 5, him and Mike been best friends. He's 6'3". My mom once described him, like you were just saying, as you know, somewhat. She was talking to another person as you would think you would be afraid of him. He's comes off, he's a big black guy. You would think, and she wasn't. She was just describing it. All my friends knew the love that she had for them. And he was telling me, like, your mom just simply put it to her friends, like, I have to deal with that all the time. The perception from society teaching us is big black guy scary, right? And so um, I grew up with that, so I wasn't really afraid of anybody physically. I told Shavella the first time I went on a date with her, like, look, I might be small, I'm not scared of any man. I don't care how big he is. Maybe Tyson. Tyson might have been the one that he was too fast. But I'm really not scared. I'll take an ass whooping if I got to, but I'm not scared of what they can do. If we see a possum or a fucking raccoon, you are on your own. I am frightened. Right. But going back to this, I'm not, I, I, I fought back quickly to bullies. And I had Shondo, who was always going to come fight for me, or Mike, who was going to come fight for me, or Topher, so I knew they were protecting me even when I didn't know they were protecting me, because people would be like, let me get your cornbread almost.
You
Some would
gonna
say
eat
that
your
it wouldn't be
cornbread?
cornbread, right? It wouldn't be cornbread, but they would be like, let me get that from you. What you gonna do? Tell Shondo? What you gonna do? Tell such and such? So I was sort of protected in that way. Um, but we talked about my privilege, right? My parents' discussion on money, and we had a house in the Lake of the Ozarks that we would drive 3 hours to and from, and bring my friends, and they'd get to stay in this house, and it had 4 hotel rooms in it. One of them was our private unit, and the others could be rented out in this resort. And so I had it very differently than my friends. And I got to learn about my privilege in high school. Out in the society, I got to learn about being white. And oh wait, I'm not questioned like they are. I I Go ahead.
I got a question for you. So when you took your buddies, your ride or dies, with you to Lake of the Ozarks, how did they feel? And did they share in their feelings in conversation with you?
They saw racist stuff and would be able to point it out faster than me. But they often were like just grateful to be coming along. I don't know, man. We were just kids being kids, and I think my parents protected us a lot in that sense. And so we had that place in the Lake of the Ozarks up until I was in high school. But it was sort of high school where I really got to know that through conversation with other peers that we were the amount of difference. And my parents came from more wealth than they actually had themselves. But we definitely were strong middle class, right? And we got, my dad took us shopping, and he took us shopping for clothes. Me and Shondo, and Jamel, me, right? He paid for tennis lessons, and he paid for our tennis lessons.
Right.
Right. So there was also that level of jealousy. There would be kids coming up to me in high school that were like, buy me this. I'm buying you that. Well, you would buy it for Shondo, you'd buy it for Nelly, you'd buy it for Fatty, you'd buy it for such and such. They're my friends. What the hell makes you think I'm supposed to just buy you something? They didn't come up to me like that, and that's how we became friends. They came over to the house, we hung out, we started to relate, we became friends. So, you would get that level of pushback as well from time to time. But I also learned in society, like I was unsuspecting. I fit right in shopping centers, and right, like my friends would get watched. I could get away with anything if they were the distraction.
Right. That, when did you notice that for the first time, that that your buddies, your guys, were always under suspicion and you were not? When did that really sink in?
So as it was sinking in was when we could drive and go to the mall ourselves. So the last 3 years of high school, really, especially those last two, we could see we were in the mall a lot. That was a place to hang out at, right? The Galleria, which
What year was this, if you don't mind me asking?
early 90s. 93 is when I graduated. So this was 91, 92,
Okay.
heavily. 90, 91, 92. And, they'd be watched when we went into stores. When we went into the small stores, they'd be watched. When we went into the bigger stores, you could see them being followed. If we split up, I was not. They were. I could watch the people watching them. But it really became interesting. I remember the first time someone tried to take back a pair of shoes to what famous bar, which was a May department store. And he couldn't. And he was a dark-skinned, tall, heavy guy. We called him PS. And he was denied the ability to take them back. And I just happened to be at the mall at that time. And we happened to run into each other in the parking lot. And I wore a size 9. He wore, I want to say, a size 13, but something much bigger than mine. And I grabbed that bag from him in the parking lot, went right back to the person that just denied him. And this couldn't have been 20 minutes difference. And asked him to return those shoes. Don't need it, receipt. Don't need to try them on. I know they fit. This is the problem. Need a new pair. And they came out, and then I came out with the shoes, handed it to him. And he said, which guy did you go to? And we described it, same exact person. In U City, we were known for dressing real nice. And we were the county kids, so they thought about that. But really, really, what we were, they took stuff, they would wear them and take it back. I didn't have to as much, but I would do some sometimes just to stay, because my parents were frugal with how they spent money on our clothes. So that became sort of a trending thing at times. And we saw what we would call flaws in the system and take advantage of those flaws in the system, which white folks do all the time in banking. And so, this was nothing new. This was American culture to us.
Mm-hmm.
I could get away with taking back anything. And especially if they were in the mall with me, because all eyes would be on them. And I am just this unsuspecting, short little white kid that just was so nice. And I could get away with taking back anything. The return policy was beautiful for me. We ran an entire mall hustle. I wrote about that in the book. We ran a mall hustle during Christmas season like you wouldn't believe. Matter of fact, Nelly spoke on it on his When I Am 17 was a name of a show VH1 did for a while.
Yeah.
Talking about when he was 17 years old, and he talked about this mall hustle.
I'm going to look forward to this. what what JD is talking about in terms of his book is his book Race for What? A White Man's Journey and Guide to Healing Racism from Within. And you can get it on Amazon. I have a copy. Yeah. I have a copy of it, and I'm looking forward to reading it and digging out more questions. It's important for us to continue to have these dialogues. And
yeah,
I want to know more about how you lived. So you go to the mall, you see your partners being followed, and you also know that the system is stacked in your behalf. Did you have conversations with your parents about this, seeing this inequality? And then also, when would you having those conversations with your good friends?
So right after high school, I smoked my first joint. And we were about to start this mall hustle. And or no, I wasn't even smoking at the time. They were smoking a joint, and I didn't want to smell like weed. And Shondo snapped at me. Man, you white. Shut up. And I was like, damn, but I still don't want to draw attention. And I went in there smelling like Christmas trees. And it was Christmas season. Maybe they, looked at me and saw it as playing in the pine trees. but it didn't matter. And he was real direct with that kind of stuff. And sometimes I didn't want to hear it, or I would want to deny this difference. And it was just plain as day, because he would just point it out, like, you can get away with this. And I would go find out. It was almost a curiosity how much I could get away with, right? Like, I wasn't trying to be catch me if you can level, but I was against corporatocracy. I would never even consider stealing from a human or a mom and pop store, but taking things back and changing tags and getting discounts and doing whatever to corporate America, fuck them. So that was one of the main reasons. Like, they would always kind of have to point out what I could get away with and what I couldn't.
Did you have that conversation with your parents, or did your parents notice how much different merchandise kept flowing through?
No, they didn't know. Matter of fact, they're surprised as hell and somewhat disappointed in their son after reading the book. But we would talk about systemic racism. We would talk about my ability to get away with things. I mean, I could talk to teachers differently. I could talk to principals differently. My dad was involved in trying to get this principal hired, even though I told him don't choose that one. But I could get away with it. So I'll tie in name dropping at this point. Miss Beale was our in-school suspension person, and she was the girls volleyball and one level of basketball coach. You'll probably recognize her last name, Miss Beale. And I was a senior in high school, and she was like, I haven't seen you in school suspension. Seen all of your friends. You'll be in here next week. And I was like, what kind of statement is that? Like, I don't do anything wrong to get into in-school suspension. I come to school. I like to participate in class. I'm not going to do that. And at the basketball game that Friday night, where Shondo and most of my friends were playing, one of my closest friends at the time, who was in the crew, he got into a fight with a kid, and that kid's friends were all in the crowd. So most of our friends were down playing basketball or whatnot. So they weren't around us. So he got jumped by about 8 kids.
Oh.
Hall monitor breaks it up and tries to not get any of us in trouble, so he lets us go. But what he didn't do is help walk us out. So they're waiting for us halfway through the hall. So Fatty jumps in like, okay, well, if it's going to go down, I'm going to grab one of them and I'm going to beat the crap out of them while the rest of them try and beat me. So I, being the racist that I am, hit the only white kid in their crew. And I end up on the ground. Another friend of mine kind of comes, pushes them off, and then the police grab us all and we get in trouble. So we get taken down to the police station. We spend in the night until my parents come. My dad is pissed. He actually grabs the police because he's pissed that we got jumped, and he's trying to tell them. And they're like, hey, I've been looking for you. And they grab me and lock me up. He didn't know he was doing that to us. So the next Monday, I'm supposed to get suspended 10 days. Like Fatty got suspended 10 days for fighting on the school. And some of them got suspended for 10 days. I'm in the room with the principal telling them that's bullshit. Literally saying that. My dad being there, I got away with it. Don't use that language, but that's not a lie. I'm like, my friend was getting jumped. What am I supposed to do? Not do it? The dude could have walked us out. The hall monitor could have walked us out. Like, we could have been protected and none of this would have happened. So I get 5 days of in-school suspension. Thanks, Miss Beal, for calling that out. So,
wow. I just want you to I want to clarify this for everybody. This is something that I do on my own. We don't name drop, we lift names up, because
okay.
when we name drop, it makes us seem important. But when we lift other people's names up, we're showing a sense of gratitude.
Yes.
There was a lesson that was shown to you, and I want to clarify this one thing. Was Miss Beal a little smug about the fact that she'd called it?
Oh, so she's probably a little smug right now about the fact that my first day in there, she, Miss, what was her name? The assistant principal came down. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on her name, but she loved me. And she came down and said, Jesse, what you doing in here? I said, I got in trouble. I'm in here for 5 days. You'll be collecting attendance the whole week. Sorry, Miss Beal. I turned around like, hey, I gotta go. And so I get the best job in the entire school for every single period. I get to hang out in the hallway and collect the attendance the whole time and go into Miss Ward, that was her name, Miss Ward's office, and hang out with her for the whole time. So yes, my high school experience was magical. And yes, Miss Beal is Bradley's mother. So we'll lift him and her up.
I appreciate that. It's coming to the end of our time together. Jesse, what do you got for closing thought or closing thoughts? Do you have any questions that you want to leave in our audience's mind for the following week?
So I want to take this quick moment then to talk about racism. And we talked about bigotry and prejudice. And if you haven't heard Dr. Claude Anderson teach you what the difference between those two are, I really hope you take the time to go research Dr. Claude Anderson and find out how he breaks down what racism is. And it's a system. It's a system to control resources. Bigotry and prejudice play a part in that, but it is a system. It is not those individual acts. Those are individual acts. Those are individuals' feelings. Racism incorporates those as a whole thing into how a system is designed to make a people with less melanin feel superior. But truly go look up Dr. Claude Anderson, because the man knows his stuff and can really break down what is needed to create the real balance of power in healing and repair. That would be how I would close this.
This isn't going to be the last time that we talk about prejudice, bigotry, and racism, but that's a parting thought. I want to give a shout out again to VPR Radio, and that would be Queen Kiana and DJ FMI for giving us this wonderful platform with which to discuss these life experiences. I got to thank my tag team partner, Dr. JD Mass.
Thank you, Kory. It's a pleasure really getting to know you and really hearing from you what it's like to be a minority in the system where the power structure is the majority, right? Like I'm the minority in mine from a power structure being on my side. So the experience is even different. But it's really it's really educational to me, and I hope becomes really educational for those of us, and I mean us low melanated folks that have not really understood what it's like to be a Black man in a white man's society. And so I just appreciate this opportunity that VPR has presented to us, for us, and that we get to share with the audience and each other.
Thank you, good sir. Until next time, this is Same Difference.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.